Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Defiance and watched the alien ships move toward Earth's space station. The ships looked beautiful and deadly at the same time. They moved like dancers in space, but Jake knew they carried weapons that could destroy his ship in seconds. 3 months had passed since humans first met these aliens who called themselves the Zephyrians. Now they were coming back with papers they said would bring peace to both races. Jake had read the treaty many times. The words looked good on paper. Humans would join something called the Galactic Confederation. They would get new technology that could solve many problems on Earth. The aliens promised to protect humans from other dangerous species in space. It sounded like everything humans had dreamed of since they first looked at the stars and wondered if they were alone, but Jake had learned to read between the lines during his 20 years in the Space Navy. The treaty said humans would have to give up control of their military. Earth would have to limit how many children people could have. All new technology would need approval from alien councils before humans could use it. These things made Jake's stomach feel sick. Admiral Linda Carter sat in her office reading the same treaty for the 100th time. She had commanded space fleets for 15 years and had never seen anything that worried her more than these innocent-looking papers. The aliens had written everything very carefully. They used words that meant one thing to humans but probably meant something else to aliens. Every promise came with conditions that would give the Zephyrians control over human lives. Linda had studied military history since she was young. She knew how conquering armies worked. The smart ones did not attack with guns and bombs. They came with gifts and promises. They made their victims want to surrender. The Zephyrians were very smart indeed. Dr. Alex Turner worked in a small lab, studying everything humans had learned about the Zephyrians. His job was to understand their language and culture. What he found made him want to warn everyone on Earth to run and hide. The Zephyrian language had layers of meaning that humans were just beginning to understand. Words that meant partnership in human languages meant ownership in Zephyrian. Terms that promised cooperation actually described the relationship between a master and a pet. Alex had found records of other alien species in the Zephyrian databases. Every one of them had signed treaties almost exactly like the one being offered to humans. Some of these species had been great warriors before they met the Zephyrians. Others had been brilliant scientists or skilled traders. All of them were now living on small worlds far from their original homes. They worked in factories making things for the Zephyrians. Their children learned only what the Zephyrians wanted them to know. They had become slaves who thought they were citizens. Colonel Amy Brooks walked through the underground tunnels beneath the capital city. She had spent months building a network of people who understood what the treaty really meant. These people worked in governments and militaries and universities around the world. They passed information in secret and made plans that could not be detected by alien listening devices. Amy knew that some humans were ready to fight if necessary. Military officers were hiding weapons and equipment in places the aliens would never think to look. Scientists were working on new technologies in secret labs. Even ordinary people were learning skills that might be needed if war came to Earth. The aliens thought humans were soft and peaceful. They were about to learn how wrong they could be. President Henry Walsh stood at his window looking out at the city below. Tomorrow he would sign the treaty that was supposed to save humanity. The alien ambassador had explained everything very carefully. Earth was in danger from other species who wanted to destroy human civilization. Only by joining the Confederation could humans hope to survive. The president wanted to believe this was true, but Henry had talked to people like Jake and Linda and Alex and Amy. They had shown him evidence that the treaty was really a trap. The Zephyrians did not want to save humanity. They wanted to control it. They wanted to turn humans into another species of workers for their empire. The president knew he had to sign the treaty to buy time for the resistance to prepare. But it made him feel like he was selling his own children into slavery. The signing ceremony would happen in 1 week. Representatives from 50 nations would watch Henry put his name on the papers. The aliens would smile and make speeches about friendship and cooperation. News cameras would broadcast the event to every corner of Earth. People would cheer because they thought their leaders had brought them safety and prosperity. None of them would know that they had just watched their freedom being traded away. None of them would understand that the beautiful alien ships in orbit were not protectors but prison guards. The treaty promised peace, but Jake and Linda and Alex and Amy and Henry all knew the truth. This was not peace. This was the beginning of a war that would decide whether humans remained free or became pets in an alien zoo, the Zephyrians thought. They had won before the fighting even started. They had studied human history and decided that humans would surrender their freedom for the promise of safety. They believed humans were just another weak species that could be controlled with clever words and false promises. They were about to discover that they had made the biggest mistake in their long history of conquering other worlds. Human leaders were already making plans that would surprise their new alien friends. Secret weapons were being built. Hidden bases were being prepared. Networks of resistance fighters were spreading across human space. The treaty would be signed, but the real war was just beginning. And this time, the Zephyrians would learn what it meant to fight a species that refused to be caged. Commander Ryan Phillips noticed the changes 6 months after President Walsh signed the treaty. He was teaching at the military academy where young officers learned to become leaders. The Zephyrians had sent advisors to help improve the training programs. These advisors wore friendly smiles and spoke in gentle voices. They said they wanted to help humans become better peacekeepers. Ryan watched as his combat courses were replaced with classes about understanding alien cultures. Students who used to learn how to fight battles now spent their time learning how to avoid conflicts. The shooting ranges were converted into meditation centers. War games were replaced with negotiation exercises. The aliens said this would make humans more civilized. Ryan knew it was making them weak and defenseless. The alien advisors carried small devices that recorded everything said in their presence. They claimed these devices helped them learn human languages better. But Ryan had noticed that students who asked hard questions or showed too much interest in military tactics often failed their courses for mysterious reasons. The best and brightest young officers were being quietly removed from the program and sent to desk jobs far from any real military units. Dr. Beth Campbell worked in Earth's main research center where scientists had once developed new technologies to help humanity explore space. She had been studying fusion power before the aliens arrived. Her team was close to creating engines that could power starships for decades without refueling. This technology could have given humans the ability to travel anywhere in the galaxy. The Zephyrian Science Council had reviewed her work and declared it too dangerous for humans to develop. They said fusion power could be used to make weapons that might hurt innocent people. Beth was ordered to stop all research and destroy her notes. Instead, she would work on improving farming techniques that had been approved by the alien overseers. Beth understood what was really happening. The aliens did not want humans to become independent. They wanted humans to depend on alien technology for everything important. Every breakthrough that might give humans an advantage was being classified as dangerous or unnecessary. Human scientists were being turned into farmers and mechanics who could only work on simple problems that posed no threat to alien control. On Mars Colony Administrator Pete Johnson, read another message from the Confederation Population Management Bureau. The aliens had decided that Mars was becoming too crowded. Families were now limited to 1 child per household. People who already had more children would need to send the extras to special education centers on distant worlds where they could learn useful skills. Pete knew these education centers were really prison camps where human children would be taught to serve alien masters. The population limits were not about overcrowding. Mars could easily support 10 times more people than currently live there. The aliens were separating human families to make resistance impossible. Children who grew up away from their parents would never learn to value human independence. The transport ships arrived every month to take away the excess population. Parents cried as their children were loaded onto alien vessels. The Zephyrians promised that families could visit each other regularly, but Pete had checked the travel schedules. No transport had ever returned to bring visitors to the education centers. The children were disappearing forever into the alien empire. Captain Jake Morrison now served on a joint patrol vessel where human and alien crews worked together to maintain peace in human space. The ship's commander was still human, but every important decision required approval from the Zephyrian oversight officer. This alien never threatened anyone or raised his voice. He just smiled and explained why each human suggestion was inappropriate or dangerous. Jake watched his fellow humans become more careful about expressing opinions that might upset their alien partners. Officers who had once been bold and decisive now hesitated before giving orders. They had learned that disagreeing with alien advice led to poor performance reviews and limited career opportunities. The humans were training themselves to be obedient servants. The patrol routes had been designed by alien strategists who claimed to know the most efficient ways to protect human settlements. But Jake had studied the patterns and realized that human ships were being kept away from the most important strategic locations. The aliens were learning everything about human defenses, while making sure humans learned nothing about alien positions. Lieutenant Kate Anderson worked in intelligence gathering for the human military. Her official job was to study alien culture, so humans could cooperate better with their new partners. But Kate had discovered access codes that let her read Zephyrian files that were supposed to be classified. What she found in those files made her sick with anger and fear. The Zephyrians kept detailed records of every species they had conquered over the past 1,000 years. Each file followed the same pattern. First contact followed by treaty negotiations, then gradual restrictions on technology and population. Military forces were weakened through cultural programs. The best minds were isolated and controlled. Within 50 years, every conquered species was relocated to reservation worlds, where they worked as laborers for the Confederation. Kate found files on 17 different species that had once been powerful enough to threaten Zephyrian dominance. Some had been great warriors who conquered other worlds through strength. Others had been brilliant scientists who created amazing technologies. All of them had made the same mistake. They had trusted Zephyrian promises and signed treaties that seemed to offer partnership but really meant surrender. The most disturbing discovery was a file labeled Human Integration Timeline. The Zephyrians had been studying humanity for decades before making first contact. They knew exactly how humans would react to different types of pressure. They had planned every step of the conquest down to the smallest detail. The treaty signing had not been a negotiation. It had been the execution of a plan that was designed to succeed no matter what humans tried to do. Kate realized that humanity was just the latest victim in a very old game. The Zephyrians had perfected the art of conquest without war. They used kindness and cooperation as weapons more effective than any bomb or bullet. They made their victims want to surrender their freedom in exchange for the illusion of safety and prosperity, but the files also contained information that gave Kate hope. Several conquered species had tried to resist before they were completely defeated. None had succeeded, but each had taught the Zephyrians something about the difficulties of controlling an unwilling population. The files showed that the Zephyrians were not as confident as they pretended to be. They knew that their empire depended on keeping their subjects ignorant and divided. Kate began copying the files and preparing to share them with people like Ryan and Beth and Pete and Jake. The humans needed to understand exactly what they were fighting against. More importantly, they needed to learn from the mistakes of other species who had failed to escape the Zephyrian trap. Knowledge was power, and Kate had found the keys to the alien prison that was closing around humanity. Admiral Linda Carter had been preparing for this day long before the Zephyrians arrived at Earth. She understood that any species advanced enough to travel between stars would not make contact unless they wanted something valuable. The friendly words and promises of partnership had never fooled her for a moment. While politicians talked about peace and cooperation, Linda had been building the tools humanity would need to survive. Operation Deep Root had started as a small program to establish emergency supply depots in remote locations. On paper, it looked like a sensible plan to help human colonies during natural disasters or equipment failures. But Linda had used her authority to create something much more important. Hidden bases were being built on asteroids and uninhabited planets throughout human space. These facilities were designed to remain invisible to alien sensors while providing everything needed to support military operations. Commander Ryan Phillips had received new orders that officially removed him from active military service. The paperwork said he was retiring to become a civilian contractor helping with colony development projects. In reality, Ryan was traveling to worlds where the Confederation had no presence to establish training facilities for human resistance fighters. These camps used only technology that existed before first contact with the aliens to ensure that no Zephyrian monitoring systems could detect them. Ryan worked with men and women who had supposedly left military service for various personal reasons. Each of them brought specialized knowledge about weapons tactics, communications, and survival skills. They were building an army that did not officially exist using equipment that was not supposed to be there. The recruits came from colonies where people had already begun to understand what the treaty really meant. The training was harder than anything the old military academies had required. Students learned to fight without modern equipment that might be detected by alien surveillance. They practiced using simple weapons and basic explosives. Most importantly, they learned to think like guerrilla fighters, who could strike fast and disappear before the enemy could respond. These skills had been forgotten during centuries of conventional warfare, but they were exactly what humans would need against a technologically superior ENEMY. Dr. Alex Turner had made discoveries that could change the entire war before it officially began. While publicly researching Zephyrian culture for better integration, he had been studying their technology and biology in secret. The aliens had made a critical mistake by allowing humans to examine their equipment and interact with their personnel. They thought humans were too primitive to understand advanced alien science. Alex had learned that all Zephyrian technology operated on specific quantum frequencies that could be disrupted with the right kind of interference. Their ships' weapons, communication systems, and life support all depended on maintaining precise harmonic resonance. If humans could generate the correct interference patterns, they could disable alien equipment without destroying it. This meant captured alien technology could be turned against its creators. More importantly, Alex had discovered that the Zephyrians were not the superior beings they pretended to be. Their empire was built on stolen technology from conquered species. They were parasites who absorbed the knowledge and skills of others without developing anything original themselves. This explained why they needed to control other species instead of simply destroying them. They needed slaves who could create new technologies for them to steal. The Zephyrian military was much smaller than their impressive displays suggested. Most of their fleet consisted of ships crewed by members of conquered species who had been forced into service. The true Zephyrian forces were concentrated in heavily defended home systems that they rarely left. Their power came from psychological dominance rather than actual military superiority. If humans could break the illusion of Zephyrian invincibility, other conquered species might join a rebellion. Dr. Beth Campbell had found ways to continue her research despite alien restrictions. The secret facility called Oro Base had been built inside a large asteroid that appeared to be just another piece of space debris. Here, Beth worked with the best scientists humanity could provide to develop new technologies, using purely human innovation and creativity. The fusion engines Beth had been working on were now operational and installed in ships that officially did not exist. These vessels could travel faster and farther than anything in the Confederation fleet, while using fuel that could be produced from common materials found throughout the galaxy. More importantly, the new engines operated on principles that alien sensors could not detect because the Zephyrians had never developed this type of technology themselves. Beth's team had also created new types of weapons that worked differently from anything the aliens had seen before. Instead of energy beams or projectiles, these weapons used controlled gravitational fields to tear apart enemy ships from the inside. The aliens had shields designed to stop conventional attacks, but they had no defense against weapons that altered The fundamental forces holding their vessels together, the most revolutionary development, was a new form of artificial intelligence that could operate independently without needing constant communication with central command systems. This meant human ships could coordinate complex operations even when alien jamming systems prevented normal radio contact. The AI systems could also learn from alien technology and adapt human equipment to use captured enemy resources. Captain Jake Morrison used his position on the joint patrol vessel to gather intelligence about Confederation fleet movements and defensive positions. The Zephyrians trusted him because he appeared to be a cooperative officer who had accepted the new order. They shared tactical information freely because they believed humans were too primitive to understand its significance. Jake learned that the impressive Confederation fleet was mostly for show. The aliens kept their ships spread out across vast distances to create the appearance of overwhelming numbers. But this meant that most sectors were actually defended by only a few vessels. If human forces could strike quickly at multiple targets, the aliens would not be able to concentrate enough ships to stop them. The alien command structure was rigid and dependent on constant communication with higher authority. Individual commanders had very little freedom to make decisions without permission from their superiors. This meant that disrupting Zephyrian communications would paralyze their entire military system. Human forces trained to operate independently would have a huge advantage in any conflict. Jake also discovered that many of the alien crew members were not loyal volunteers but conscripts from conquered species who served only because they had no choice. These people might be willing to help humans if they believed there was a real chance of defeating the Zephyrians. Building alliances with other oppressed species could multiply human strength many times over. The resistance network was growing larger and more sophisticated every day. People like Linda and Ryan and Alex and Beth and Jake were proving that humans could not be controlled as easily as the Zephyrians believed. The aliens thought they had won the war before it started, but they had never fought a species like humanity before. They were about to learn that some cages could not hold the creatures they were designed to contain. The moment Admiral Linda Carter had been preparing for finally arrived when the Zephyrian High Command issued an ultimatum that could not be ignored or delayed. All human nuclear weapons had to be surrendered within 30 days for safe disposal by Confederation experts. The aliens claimed these weapons were too dangerous for humans to control and posed a threat to galactic peace. President Henry Walsh knew this was the final step in making humanity completely defenseless. Henry met with his secret advisors in a room that had been specially shielded against alien listening devices. Linda explained that the resistance was as ready as it would ever be. Hidden bases throughout human space were fully operational and stocked with weapons and supplies. Training camps had produced thousands of fighters who knew how to operate without being detected. Most importantly, the new technologies developed by Dr. Beth Campbell were ready for combat testing. The president made a decision that would change human history forever. He would publicly comply with the alien demands while secretly ensuring that the real weapons never left human control. Fake nuclear warheads had been prepared months earlier as part of Operation Deep Root. The aliens would get convincing replicas while the actual weapons were hidden in the secret arsenal that officially did not exist. Lieutenant Kate Anderson had spent weeks analyzing the intelligence she had gathered from Zephyrian files. Her discovery of the human integration timeline had revealed the exact schedule the aliens planned to follow. According to their projections, humanity would be completely subjugated within 5 years. The next phase involved relocating most of the human population to worlds where they could be easily controlled, while their home planet was converted into an industrial center. Kate had also learned the locations of key Confederation facilities throughout human space. Communication relays that allowed alien commanders to coordinate their forces, supply depots that kept their ships operational, monitoring stations that watched for signs of resistance activity. All of these targets had been carefully mapped and assigned. To strike teams that were ready to move on Linda's command, the alien overseers had become careless about security because they believed humans were too weak and divided to pose any real threat. They shared information freely in the presence of their human liaisons. They left their equipment unguarded because they thought humans were too primitive to understand how it worked. They had no idea that everything they said and did was being recorded and analyzed by the Resistance Network. Commander Ryan Phillips received the activation code for Operation Prometheus while he was supposedly conducting a routine training exercise on a remote mining world. The message appeared to be a standard supply requisition, but hidden within the bureaucratic language was the signal that every resistance fighter had been waiting for. The war for human freedom was about to begin. Ryan's first target was a confederation communication hub that coordinated alien activities across 6 star systems. The facility was lightly guarded because the Zephyrians never imagined that humans could organize an attack on such a strategic target. Ryan's team approached using mining equipment that was common throughout the region. To alien sensors, they looked like ordinary workers going about their daily jobs. The attack was over in minutes. Ryan's fighters used electromagnetic pulse weapons, developed by Beth's team to disable the alien equipment without destroying it. The station personnel were captured before they could send any warning signals. Most importantly, the humans now control the facility that could be used to disrupt Confederation communications throughout the region while providing false information. To alien commanders. Dr. Beth Campbell watched from Aurora Base as reports came in from strike teams across human space. Her new technologies were performing exactly as designed. Ships equipped with gravitational weapons were disabling alien vessels without suffering any damage themselves. The quantum frequency disruptors were shutting down Zephyrian equipment faster than their crews could repair it. Most surprisingly, the artificial intelligence systems were proving more effective than anyone had hoped. The AI networks were learning from each engagement and sharing their knowledge with other human forces instantly. They could predict alien tactical responses and suggest countermeasures before enemy commanders had time to adapt. They were also interfacing with captured alien computers and extracting valuable intelligence about Confederation operations throughout the galaxy. Beth realized that humanity had achieved something the Zephyrians thought was impossible. Humans had developed technologies that were superior to alien systems in several critical areas. The parasitic nature of Confederation science had made them dependent on stolen innovations from conquered species. When they encountered truly original human creativity, they had no defense against it. Captain Jake Morrison led the assault on the main Confederation fleet base in the Alpha Centauri system. The aliens had concentrated their forces there because they believed it was the most secure location in human space. Jake's battle group approached using new stealth technology that made their ships invisible to alien sensors. The enemy had no warning until human weapons began tearing their vessels apart. The battle revealed how dependent the Confederation was on psychological dominance rather than actual military superiority. When faced with an enemy that refused to surrender, many of the alien crew members simply abandoned their posts and fled. The conscripts from conquered species either surrendered immediately or switched sides to fight against their former masters. Only the pure Zephyrian personnel continued to resist, and they were vastly outnumbered. Jake captured the base commander and learned that the entire Confederation military was in chaos. Communication breakdowns caused by the coordinated strikes were preventing alien forces from organizing any effective response. Individual commanders were making contradictory decisions because they could not contact their superiors for orders. The rigid command structure that had been a source of strength was now becoming a fatal weakness. Administrator Pete Johnson on Mars Colony had been secretly organizing civilian resistance for months. When Operation Prometheus began, he led an uprising that took control of all major installations on the planet. The alien overseers and their human collaborators were arrested before they could destroy vital equipment or escape to report what was happening. Pete's people also liberated the transport ships that had been taking human children to alien education centers. The rescued children provided horrifying testimony about the conditions in these facilities. They described forced labor camps where young humans were being trained to serve as workers in Zephyrian industries. Many had been subjected to medical experiments designed to make them more obedient and less intelligent. The liberation of Mars sent a powerful message throughout human space. If civilians could successfully revolt against alien control, then professional military forces could certainly do the same. Colony after colony declared independence from Confederation authority. Human populations that had seemed resigned to their fate suddenly found the courage to fight for their freedom. Dr. Alex Turner was monitoring alien communications from his research facility when he detected something that changed everything. The Zephyrian High Command was receiving reports from across their empire about rebellions among other conquered species. The successful human resistance was inspiring planets that had been subjugated for centuries to rise up against their oppressors. The psychological foundation of Confederation power was crumbling. The myth of Zephyrian invincibility had been shattered by human actions. Species that had accepted slavery for generations were remembering what it meant to be free. The empire that had taken 1,000 years to build was beginning to collapse in a matter of days. The war that followed Operation Prometheus was unlike anything the Zephyrian Confederation had experienced in their 1,000 years of conquest. Previous rebellions had been desperate last stands by species fighting for survival against overwhelming odds. The human resistance was something entirely different. It was a calculated military campaign designed not just to win freedom for humanity, but to destroy the entire system of alien domination that had enslaved dozens of worlds. Captain Jake Morrison now commanded a battle fleet of ships that had not existed 6 months earlier. The vessels used technology that combined human innovation with captured alien equipment in ways the Zephyrians had never imagined possible. Jake's forces moved through space like ghosts, striking at targets throughout the former Confederation territory and disappearing before enemy reinforcements could arrive. The assault on the Zephyrian home system had been planned with the same careful attention to detail that had made Operation Prometheus so successful. The aliens expected a direct attack that would allow them to use their superior numbers and defensive positions to crush the human fleet. Instead, they found their industrial centers systematically destroyed by small groups of fighters who knew exactly where to strike for maximum damage. Jake's strategy was based on Dr. Alex Turner's analysis of Zephyrian psychology and culture. The aliens were not warriors who could adapt to unexpected tactics. They were bureaucrats who followed rigid procedures and became paralyzed when their plans failed. By attacking targets they never expected to lose, Jake created chaos throughout their command structure that spread faster than their ships could respond. The most devastating blow came when human forces captured the central communication hub that controlled all Confederation military operations. Dr. Beth Campbell's artificial intelligence systems took over the alien networks and began broadcasting messages to every conquered world in the Empire. These transmissions contained detailed information about Zephyrian weakness and specific instructions for organizing successful rebellions. The psychological impact was immediate and catastrophic for alien control. Species that had been enslaved for centuries learned that their masters were not the invincible gods they pretended to be. The broadcasts included tactical information about Zephyrian military weaknesses and technical data about their equipment that resistance fighters could use to level the playing field. Most importantly, they proved that freedom was possible by showing how humans had broken their chains. Admiral Linda Carter coordinated the liberation campaigns from her command center on Aurora Base. The hidden facility had become the nerve center of a revolution that was spreading across the galaxy faster than anyone had thought possible. Reports arrived daily from worlds where local populations had risen against their alien overseers. Some revolts succeeded immediately while others required assistance from human military units, but the pattern was always the same. Linda realized that the Confederation had created the conditions for its own destruction by suppressing the natural fighting spirit of conquered species. For so many generations they had made those populations desperate for any chance to strike back at their oppressors. When humans proved that the Zephyrians could be defeated, every world that had ever suffered under alien rule wanted to join the fight. The military situation became hopeless for the Confederation when their own conscript forces began switching sides en masse. Commander Ryan Phillips had been working with representatives from a dozen different species to coordinate joint operations against Zephyrian strongholds. These former slaves knew the locations of secret bases and supply depots that even human intelligence had not discovered. They also understood alien tactics and equipment better than any human analyst. Ryan learned that the Confederation military was far smaller than their propaganda suggested. Most of their impressive fleet consisted of ships crewed by reluctant conscripts who served only because their families were held hostage on prison worlds. When these crew members realized that the human rebellion offered a real chance of victory, they sabotaged their own vessels and provided intelligence about Confederation operations. The Zephyrian response to the crisis revealed the true nature of their civilization. Instead of fighting to defend their empire, they began evacuating their core worlds and retreating to heavily fortified systems beyond the reach of rebel forces. They abandoned millions of their own citizens and collaborators to save the ruling elite. This cowardly behavior destroyed any remaining loyalty among species that had served the Confederation faithfully for generations. Dr. Alex Turner monitored alien communications and discovered that the Zephyrian government was in complete collapse. Different factions were blaming each other for the disaster and fighting over control of the remaining military assets. Some wanted to negotiate with the humans, while others demanded a final desperate attack on Earth, the unity that had held their empire together for so long was dissolving into chaos and recrimination. Alex also learned that the Confederation had been hiding the true scope of their empire from the species they controlled. Dozens of worlds that thought they were alone, in their suffering, discovered that they were part of a vast network of oppression. This knowledge encouraged even isolated populations to join the rebellion because they understood they were not fighting alone against impossible odds. Lieutenant Kate Anderson had become the primary liaison between human forces and the growing alliance of liberated species. Her intelligence network now spanned hundreds of worlds and provided real-time information about Confederation activities throughout the galaxy. Kate discovered that the aliens had been planning to expand their empire by conquering new species, but the rebellion had forced them to abandon these campaigns and retreat to defensive positions. More importantly, Kate learned that other alien civilizations outside the Confederation had been watching the human rebellion with great interest. Several independent species offered military assistance and trade agreements to the new alliance of free worlds. The Zephyrians had made enemies throughout the galaxy by their aggressive expansion, and those enemies were eager to help finish what humanity had started. President Henry Walsh addressed the galaxy from Earth when the Zephyrian High Command finally requested negotiations to end the war. The alien leadership offered to return to the original treaty terms with some modifications that would give humans more autonomy within the Confederation structure. They promised to respect human independence and limit their interference in internal affairs. Henry's response was broadcast to every world in known space. Humanity would accept nothing less than the complete dissolution of the Confederation and the establishment of a new galactic order based on genuine cooperation between free and equal species. There would be no return to the old system of domination disguised as partnership. The age of alien empires was ending and would not be allowed to return. The final Zephyrian surrender came not through military defeat, but through the collapse of their ability to control their former subjects. When the last prison worlds were liberated and their populations joined the rebellion, the aliens no longer had the workforce needed to maintain their civilization. Their technology was useless without slaves to operate it, and their economy collapsed when the tribute from conquered worlds stopped flowing. Administrator Pete Johnson now served as Earth's representative to the new Galactic Council, where every species had an equal voice in decisions affecting the galaxy. The Council's first act was to establish laws preventing any civilization from dominating others through force or deception. The second was to create a mutual defense alliance that would protect all members from future attempts at conquest. The treaty that had promised peace while declaring war had accomplished something the Zephyrians never intended. It had taught humanity that freedom was worth any sacrifice and that no species had the right to rule over others. The humans had kept their promise to the galaxy even though no one had asked them to make it. They had proven that some chains could never hold a people determined to be free. The war was over, but the real victory was just beginning. For the first time in galactic history, dozens of species were working together as equals to build a civilization, based on cooperation rather than conquest. The Zephyrian Empire was dead, and in its place stood something far more powerful. An alliance of free peoples who would never again allow themselves to be enslaved by false promises of peace and prosperity.